Hello, and welcome to The Experiment. I have gathered my team, close friends of mine, today, right now, at a roundtable, and we're going to talk about our experiences of going from non-affirming to affirming of the LGBTQ plus community, specifically in our theology. This is an experiment. I don't know how it's going to go. My goal is I wanted you guys to get to hear from the rest of the people who've been on this journey with me. We all went on a journey together, which feels somewhat unique. I don't know that I see this happening a ton everywhere, but we all got to engage in this conversation, this process. Every person sitting at this table had their own individual wrestling match with me, with the conversation, with the Holy Spirit, with the Bible, with themselves, with culture, right, with their fear of man. Also, Mika just gave birth to my nephew a few days ago, Zach's baby. And so little Kai might be crying in the background. If you hear that, just know there's a baby somewhere in this house working it out. All right. So to get us started, you guys, the first question I want to ask, and just, feel free to chime in however it is that, whatever you have to bring to the table. I want to know, when I first came out to you as a gay person, when I came to you and I was like, hey, I'm gay, I want to know. Yeah, that's exactly how it went. I want to know, what was your initial reaction? What was your gut reaction? What was your feeling, your thought process? What was going on? Any and all of it. I want to hear about it. How'd it go? Who wants to go ahead, Annabelle?
I actually remember being really shocked. A lot of people were like, oh yeah, I knew. I knew your story, and then you getting here, I was like, what? Because I remember you being like, I need to talk to you, I need to tell you something. I was like, okay. And then we scheduled that a week later, and I was just like, what is he going to tell me? This feels a little serious. And I thought you were going to tell me that you were moving. It was very different. Yeah, so I remember hearing your story and being so impacted by it, and then going home, laying on my couch, canceling my whole day, and just staring out the window for an hour and just being like, what is life? What does this mean? And that lasted for a long time. And then I remember my initial feeling was just sadness. I think there was expectation, and I've continued to experience that from other people, with people coming out, or just these stories and stuff, of just expectation not met, or I remember just feeling really sad, because I also felt like you were sad too. I remember being around you and feeling sad. And then I remember it was maybe I don't know, 1 to 3 months after that. I'm not really sure. That's kind of a wide spectrum. Window. But I just remember you stopped feeling sad. Something shifted in you, and that made me rethink things. I had to be this doesn't feel bad anymore, because I thought the sadness meant this wasn't supposed to be here. Maybe this was going to change, and everything in me wanted to stay with you and be here with you in this. And I loved going on walks with you, and hearing your process about this was awesome. I was I don't want to be anywhere else. Even if I'm figuring this out, doesn't mean I don't want to be here. Nothing in me was repellent, but yeah, I remember the sadness shifted in you, and that made me okay, I need to look at this. I need, something changed in me too.
That was so positive.
Oh. Great. When you first told me, I remember feeling probably stunned and confused were probably the top two words. I think stunned and confused because this man that I trust and that's helped change my life and that I trust and believe in, and then my theology that I've been taught all my life are coming together and hitting heads. So I'm this doesn't make sense to me, because I know this man knows the Lord. I know he trusts him. I know he loves these people. Just all this stuff was coming to my mind. I'm but everything that I've been taught has told me that this is not right and this can't happen. And so I think I was just confused for a second. I'm oh, okay. Yeah, so I think I was stunned, and then, which
so you were stunned.
I was stunned, yeah. But I don't think I felt opposed to it, which felt cool. There was...
Isn't that shocking?
It was shocking, yeah. I think this whole process has felt like that, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, but the first part, I didn't feel super opposed to it, which was interesting. I'm there's not pushback here. There was wanting to figure out and understand, but there wasn't I didn't want to push anything away, so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think for me, when you came out to me, I wasn't shocked, so to speak. I think I was like, oh, that's just like another element of Mike, And it wasn't like a huge deal. It didn't feel like it changed my relationship with you. It didn't feel like my friendship with you would be different or anything like that. I was like, yeah, you're gay. You're gonna be with who you want to be with. That's kind of my mentality. The afterwards obviously was a little different, but initially I was like, it wasn't shocking. I didn't feel any desire to distance myself from you. I didn't have like the conditioning I think like some of the people do of like, oh, this is bad. I think initially my response to that was mostly that I didn't know exactly what the Bible said about homosexuality, so I think I avoided learning about it because I didn't want to hear what people had to say. I straight up avoided it. I didn't want to think about it. So I think that kind of let me bypass some of like the working out the theology stuff. But yeah, I wasn't too shocked. I was like, oh, this is I'm glad that you can actually come out and say it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to go to the other stuff. Yeah,
sure. Similar to Zach, I was really confused. Like, I was surprised. Like, I didn't see it coming, but then I was really confused. I was like, how are you gay? Like, I just didn't understand how. And I think also just like, up until that point, it's like you're either a follower of Jesus or you're gay. Like, it's never, like, you can't have both. And so you coming out as gay, I was like, but I know that you know Jesus. So like how that like shattered that whole belief. And so I was pretty confused. I was also afraid. I don't think of you, but I think of what this meant. Like, what does this mean for like my relationships? Like, what are people going to think of me if I'm like friends with someone who's gay? Like, like for real though, like I was thinking that. And so I think just like of what people thought, like I was pretty afraid of that. And also just like having been a student at a ministry school, at a Christian school, was like, that just, I mean, they just didn't add up. These things didn't add up at all. And so I think I was just like, I don't know what this means in the long run. Like, if you're gay, like, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for, like, my beliefs? What does that, I could just go on and on. So I was afraid. I was confused. I was pretty surprised. I remember wanting space. Like, I didn't want to be around you for a little bit. I was just, like, I didn't really know how, like, what step to take after that. I was just like, I don't, like, what do I say to you? I'm not even sure what I'm processing. I'm just afraid. I'm confused, and all the things. And so I just remember like feeling like I wanted to retract and like not connect with you at first.
I remember blacking out when Mike told me he was gay. We were sitting on a couch and you like told me your story, like the moments where God had spoken to you, all that good stuff. And I remember just sitting there being like, where's this going? Wherever this is going, I don't know if I want to go. I remember being worried, like as you kept talking, I was like, uh-oh. And then you said, at some point you made like an emphatic statement, like, okay, I believe I'm a gay man, and you've been going on this journey and you were ready to start tackling this thing with more of a bent of like the obedience side and the, no, God's speaking to me here, all that stuff. And so I remember blacking out, sitting there, and I had this strange dissonant moment where I remember being like, okay, A plus B. I'm like, okay, Mike's my friend, Mike's my leader, loves me, I love him. We have a good relationship. This feels solid. This new thing's coming in here, and for some reason I feel like it's changing everything. Why does it feel like it's changing everything? Yeah. And maybe it could have been a little bit like, maybe I felt betrayed. I don't know. I think I would have known that. I don't know that I felt betrayal. It was more just like, I have been so taught, programmed, and I will say by other people, just because I do believe that's true. At that point, I had not looked into this myself at all. And I don't think a lot of us had, and so my programming kicked in, right? And I became this, I was kind of like, what do I say? Like, I was afraid of like offending you or saying something wrong. And then all of these exterior things, like what, like the things that like you weren't ascribing to, you were just confessing to me like, hey, this is real for me. And then I started putting all these things like on you, and then I felt like I couldn't talk to you, and I felt like an idiot. So I basically I kind of feel like I went into like a homophobic shutdown where I was like, I'm scared to say anything at all. I don't want to ruin this. And I just thought for some reason Mike was going to immediately be like this offended, like if I said something wrong, you'd just be offended at me and then just trash whatever our relationship was. And I'm like, you don't do that, So it was really weird, and I don't look back very proudly on that moment. I was kind of like, I just got weird.
Okay, Mika, you're last but not least. Here we go.
Which makes sense in the order.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
We're doing this chronologically.
Okay, so when you came out to me, I'll never forget it. You told the story to me. You told me you had never told your story the way that you had with me, because you're like, I'm going to change things up. You remember?
I do
and
now, wow.
You like created context. You're like, it's gonna feel like a punch to the face. And back then, I was just very like, yeah, I can handle anything. Like, let's go. And you know, the way you told your story was like you started with the end as the beginning, and then we went on a 3-hour journey or however long.
What did he say?
He was just like, we were walking, and he was like, I'm gay in the woods, and then I just kept walking. Do you remember? I didn't even like address him.
And just kept like hands behind your back, just.
Behind your back.
Yeah, literally. And then he proceeded to tell me the story and all this stuff, and I think I just remember being like, I'm going to listen to your story. Like, I don't know. Like, I think I probably blacked out as well. Like, I just was like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm here for this. And then at the end, I really didn't, I think I was like trying to whip out all these kind of responses that I thought I would say when I would be in this kind of situation. So I was like, you know, like, I value you, and like, thanks for being vulnerable, you know, just kind of like all that cliche, like, you know. And I went home, and I literally I like hugged Annabelle like 17 times. And I couldn't like express what was happening inside of me, but I just essentially felt like so burdened or so sad, and I like just laid on my bed, and I literally hugged all my roommates. I had like 10 of them at the time. So I just like had like so many options there. But the next feeling after that was anger. Like, I was so angry. It's probably like, I never get angry, and like I was angry for like 2 weeks, which there's layers to my anger, and I think you guys like, yeah. But I wasn't, later on I realized I wasn't angry at you, but I was angry at like, it was like selfish. It was like, Mike has like influenced my life, and like, how am I gonna like climb the ministry ladder? Like, this is like, I had like these thoughts like, he like is the only one who teaches on discernment. Like, how am I who's gonna teach me about discernment? Like,
Because you couldn't listen to me anymore.
yeah, and I was like, I was so angry. I was like upset at God, because I was just like, oh, I felt like there's a divine connection here. I mean, there was. Anyways. But I was angry for 2 weeks specifically.
Wow,
but
crazy.
it wasn't really on you. Anyways, so that's
cool.
how I felt.
Thank you. Thank you for not expressing that anger to me. I appreciate that. Okay, so I want to go to some specific moments with certain individuals at this point. I want to talk about certain things that happened along the way. So in the chronological order of all this, Marcus was my only roommate at the time, right? So he and I were living together, and I'm having these moments with the Lord. No one else knows what's going on. And I'm like in the woods yelling, and the Lord is confronting me, and I'm like, oh my God, my life is falling apart. And so then Marcus comes home from work or whatever. I don't know if you were leaving it. I don't know. But anyway, so I came home, and I'm like talking to Marcus. I'm like, I gotta tell him what's happening. And I wasn't even sure what was going on, but Marcus has a unique seat in all this, because I started telling him stuff before I knew where it was going or what it all meant yet. I just started confessing stuff, because I was like, I mean, I hold my home as a sacred space, and I'm like, I'm gonna be telling him what's going on in my life and whatever. And so I'm just sitting here telling him, and he's just sitting there listening to me, just being very listen-y. For a while, like for weeks, if not months, like he's just listening to me. And then a few months into this process, and at this point, only a few people know that I'm like embracing this, and I'm like facing it now and whatever. And I start noticing that Marcus is living his life as if this isn't even happening. He's treating me like it's not going on. One time he and I and a friend of ours we were watching a show, and some character made some homophobic slur about gay people, and he busted up laughing. And it had been a couple of months at this point of me like confiding in him and sharing this process, and he lost it. He just couldn't stop laughing. Yeah, and then my friend and I were like kind of like looking at each other like, why is he laughing so hard? Like the moment's over, and that wasn't even that funny. And so after he kept laughing, eventually to a certain point in that moment, I actually felt hurt. I was like, okay, this is offensive actually that he's laughing this hard. He knows what I'm going through. He knows what I'm processing, and this is how he's responding. So that was like a red flag for me. I was like, what is this? And then anyway, so we had a few moments like that I would like pull him aside and I'm like, bro, what's going on? And I'm just kind of like trying to figure out, why am I experiencing this weird, unexplainable change in his behavior or how he was treating me. He started getting more distant and like more like, I don't know, selective about how he was behaving around me and like, you know, just how open he was or whatever. And I'm like, dude, is everything okay? And I'm like, I'm not jumping to he's being homophobic, but I'm like trying to figure out any other explanation for why his behavior has changed at this point, you know? Which is kind of jarring for any gay person. When people change their behavior without explaining to you why it's happening, it is so painful. So anyway, I want to be able to, Marcus is going to kick us off into the individual journey of these processes. Marcus, can you share a little bit about what that was like for you and, you know, what you were thinking and, yeah.
Yay. I'm really excited to revisit this. Yeah, so my initial reaction was, I like still holds. Like I don't think I was like, I thought less of you as a leader, as a friend, as a teacher, you know. But I think the bigger challenge for me was that I didn't know what to do with a gay person who had the proximity you had and the relationship you had in my life. You know, literally I was just like, what does this mean? You know? And I remember one of my first thoughts, like you mentioned, like I would like distance myself from you, right? And I think, I guess I distance myself from you in a physical sense, right? Like we would like watch movies and stuff together, and we would sit close together and we were just watching a movie, right? And then after a while, I'd sit a little farther away, or I'd like lay down away from you or something like that, you know? Oh God, it's so horrible thinking back to it. But I think it's because, I guess Stan talks about like an ick factor. I think that's what came up. I didn't know what to do with that. I was like, oh, like physical touch all of a sudden feels different now. You know, it was like, am I endangering myself, or am I expressing something that I don't mean to, you know, like expressing interest or something like that by, you know, showing physical, you know, like, I don't know, just, this is, I mean, it sounds so stupid thinking about it now, and also like realizing it's so self-centered too. It was very much about like my experience and less so about really considering your experience, you know? I think that's the part that I feel the most embarrassed and ashamed of, because it was very selfish and self-centered in that space for me. In the space that you had been considering and learning and discovering so much about yourself, you know? So that was really sucky. So you started like actually bringing these things up, right? You started like having a conversation with me about it. And that's when I also started like realizing I'm absolutely just avoiding this subject as a whole. I don't want to talk about it. Like I don't want to talk about it. You can talk about it, but I don't want to talk about it because I didn't have any thoughts on it. You would share stuff, and then I would never revisit it. I wouldn't come back to it and be like, what do I think about this? Like, and then you're like bleeding out over here and just like, you know, emptying yourself. And I'm like, I don't know what I think about it, but I'm going to let you keep doing it. And it's kind of that thing you're telling about, like, you have been talking about more recently. It's like someone stripping in front of you, vulnerability, like with vulnerability, and then like you don't know where you stand. I'm like, but you're letting them do it. And I was like, I was doing that. So that really sucks. It's like really hard revisiting some of those moments because it reminds me of how poorly I treated you. You know, as someone who is so close to me, and someone who came to me like with honesty and trust, you know, and value for our relationship, you know, and you didn't have to do that, but you still did it, you know, and I think that's what was the most painful part. But yeah, I think on the recovery side of things, of like finally getting to a place where like, you know what, I can't keep letting this happen. You know, I had to like work through a lot of stuff. It's just like, is this homophobia? And like actually coming to terms like, yeah, it is. Like, this isn't normal. I don't treat other people like this. And I was like, oh God, why is this happening? You know? And I got to work out all the ways that I like had learned this from somewhere, you know? You asked me a couple questions that were really, really important. I think the first one was, you asked me if, like, you kind of presented a scenario essentially that like, if everyone else was homosexual and you're the only heterosexual guy and they're forcing you, they're saying, hey, in order to be right with God, you have to change your sexuality. You have to be homosexual. I remember you asking me that, and it's like, could you do that? And I was like, no, there's no way I could do that. You know, like that won't happen for me, you know? And I was like, oh my God, what do I do with that? You know, like literally that putting myself in that position help humanize the situation more than I think the theology and like the Bible and all that stuff. It was like, oh, this is a person who is trying to be as honest as they are, you know, as they can be, expressing themselves, and then saying that it's a bad thing. And I'm like, I can't do that, you know? I can't change my sexuality, and it's so wrong for me to even assume that for somebody else or consider that like, hey, I'm gonna force you to do this, or like you have to do that. And I was like, oh, that's what Christians think right now. And I still didn't know what I thought about it, you know. And I think I didn't feel the need to have to know yet, because I was trying to have like empathy here. I was like trying to understand what this actually is like, you know, and that really did a number for me. It changed. I think that one question actually changed everything for me. That helped, like putting myself in a position like that, and then it started bringing more stuff up about like what I had been taught about homosexuality, like it's a sin, or you like hate the sin but love the sinner, or like you can say like I love you and I support you but I don't agree with you, or something like that. And all that stuff, I was like, I think that's the stuff I've always avoided because I never understood it. I always thought that was bullshit. But everyone was saying it, so I'm like, maybe there's truth to it, you know? I didn't know what to do with it, but like it just felt so whimsy. Like there's no substance to it, and it was so weak, you know? Yeah, and I remember even having conversations in a ministry school, like, what do you do, like, if you go to a gay person's wedding, you know? Like they would talk about that, and people would have all these elaborate responses of like how they, you know, what they believe and what the Bible says, and how do they show love. And I'm like, this isn't love, you know? This is like, there's structure and protocol. I'm like, there's no responding to a person here, you know? And so that, like, my process really started with making this like about a human being and less so about God, honestly, and about theology.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that was a really fun time for both of us. Okay, Haley, I want to go to your world. There was a fateful day, right? I remember I had a few painful conversations up to that point in the day, and then you came over and we were working on some emails, and we didn't get to do a ton of work because we had this to work out, right? And so I just took some time and I don't remember what all I said. I wish I could, but I basically was like, I'm not trying to change your mind or convince you about something. I'm trying to be as honest as I can about who God is and what he's saying to me. Like, that's what I'm like honestly trying to wrestle out here. And so the fact that I'm being treated this way and that people are saying these things is so painful. And I remember being in tears because I was just overwhelmed at that point. That day I was bottoming out. I was so tired and frustrated and sad at how I was being treated by Christians who were close to me. I was like, I couldn't, right? And so I think that was kind of a pivotal moment in our relationship. I don't remember why it came up, but I just wanted to hear from what you can recall from that experience. I think that was impactful for you too, right?
Yes. Definitely was. When I think back to that conversation, I don't like remember all the points that we hit. Like it's kind of like a blur to me. I remember feeling your vulnerability and feeling like this guy's heart is like right here, and I hadn't like been sensitive to that before. Even when you were sharing your story for the first time, like I wasn't like catching that. And so in that conversation, I remembered like watching you cry and watching you just like share more of like your heart in this and why it's so not okay for me to have been treating you that way and everything. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, you're like a human being, like, which is such a like, duh. But it's like, I think just in that conversation, I like felt you. And that wasn't something I was sensitive to before. And at one point I was really recognizing like there's like obedience here in your story, and you like coming out and you being honest and you seeking the Lord on this. I felt like your heart towards the Lord in that. And I remember sitting on the couch, my laptop was still like on my lap, and I remember like all of a sudden the presence of God came into the room, and I couldn't like I couldn't get past. I was like, God is literally like here right now. And again, up until this point, like it was God or homosexuality. It's like there's no like having both. And so feeling like the presence of the Lord like in your living room that day was a game changer. And that was the reason why I started like looking into this more, because I was like, if I'm feeling like God in this, like I can't turn away from that. Like I can't ignore this. I know what his presence feels like, and it was there. Yeah, so I guess like in that conversation it was feeling like being able to be in touch with like, okay, this is like a human being like coming to me like vulnerably and honestly and just real. You were so real about it. And on top of that, like God, just like his presence in the room, I'm like, I can't like look away from this. I can't keep treating you like you're distant or you're on the outside of something. I couldn't do that anymore. That was a turning point for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Anybody else at the table have moments in that journey where, the initial shock had kind of had its effect, and then now we were moving forward in terms of, oh God, he's still gay, it's still here, I still have a relationship with this person. Was there anything defining or significant in that journey or process for you guys as you were living your lives and this kept representing itself that, was memorable or noteworthy along the way?
I think like Marcus, I think it was actually our first conversation that we had, the one that we talked about first, was when you brought up the, like, if everyone was homosexual and you were straight, what would that, like, how would you change that? Like if someone said, you're a sinner, God hates you now, you got to change this, Yeah, like you can't get into heaven, like all this stuff. You need to change this. I'm like, oh yeah, I couldn't do that. And so I think that, like Marcus said, like put like humanity on it. And I think even like I didn't feel like obviously the Lord was there in that place, but I didn't feel like his presence and that kind of stuff, like Haley was talking about, which is awesome. But I think it was my humanity that like compelled me in that moment. I'm like, I can't, like, it's only been 6 Bible verses that have told me not to do this up to this point, but like my humanity like made me want to like look into this more, because like people, I can't make people like change this stuff if I can't picture myself changing or knowing how even to change that. I'm like, I can't expect that of other people. And I think the reason it was so easy actually for me to move forward and to not like freak out was because I had never thought about it before. I was told what to think about it, and I was told what the Bible said about it, but I never thought for myself anything else. So I'm like, okay, this carrot is a vegetable and it comes from the ground and that's it, like, I'm like, okay, great. I'm just trying to think of something that you're told, like, hey, this is this tomato. Yeah, sorry. Someone told you this is a carrot. This is a carrot, and you eat it. This is it. This is an apple. You eat it, and so that's like what I was told, and I never looked into it, and I never like thought about it more than that, So I think just even you bringing up like, what if this is different? What if these are like people, like the emotions and like the stuff they can't change. It's not just a sin. So I'm like, oh wow, I've never thought about it that way. So
who knew that was helpful?
Yeah,
if I'd known that, I would have been saying it earlier.
I remember thinking like, I've never heard a Christian say they're gay. Like I've never like been around that. It was always something I was like, what? And then in my process, I remember thinking back, because I grew up in a Christian school, really tiny, very conservative. And I remember when gay marriage was legalized, and I remember being the only one celebrating like, oh my gosh, I think I'm really excited about this. I think I'm like really glad that this thing is happening. I had no reason to believe that. Like all my teachers were like, no, this is wrong. This is like against the Bible. But I just remember thinking like just having some understanding of love, or like the Bible talks about love, and how is this love? Like how can like the church tell people who they can and can't marry? And I remember just like having memories of these things like hitting me like along the way, where I'm like, yeah, this doesn't make sense to be so against this. Like there's something off here. And then having close people around me that I was like, man, I remember you were going after this in a way that you were like, it was so trusting. It was so like, no matter what happens, like if I'm gay, if I'm not, like no matter what, I'm gonna move forward here and the Lord's gonna catch me. And I remember like that was probably the biggest thing that I was like, oh my gosh, like everyone needs to go after things like this, that like no matter what happens, we are caught, we're fine, we're good, like we can't mess up here, like we can't go beyond him. And I remember just thinking like people close to me, I'm like, man, I wish they would go after this like this. And people's stories of just being like, oh my gosh, if they had the freedom, like just never grasping that, just never buying into like there's an answer here for them because of where they've been, and just being like, oh, I wish these people close to me could look at this subject the way you were.
Because they were gay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Wanting them to like have that trust that like no matter what, I can look at this and not be afraid.
Okay. I want to chime in real quick on this with you. So you seem to have like a particular, like as I hear different people processing this for the last year or however long it's been for us, 2 years almost, for you particularly, you seem to have a a specific response to the freedom and the willingness to go out into the unknown on it or whatever. You take a particular like revel in it. You like it. You like celebrate. And I think we are of the same spirit, but you have like stars in your eyes on that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on there when that's happening? What is that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know, maybe. I'm getting emotional when you say that, so maybe it's something. I think I just like, okay, so I have someone really close to me in my life who has a similar story to you, reminds me a lot of you. And so when you were telling your story, I was just thinking about this person and just the love I had for this person, and like you just feeling that you could go here and be okay, and like your whole journey like had freedom all over it. And then feeling like, man, like if it takes this person, you know, coming out, that they like would feel so like you, if they could feel free, if, you know, like I know this person, oh my God, it like stings. I just kept thinking about this person that I love so dearly, and, you know, this person is definitely not affirming, and coming out would be like the worst thing ever. I just, in your journey, I was like, man, I wish, I want this person to be gay.
Oh, you wanted them to be gay?
Yes. I wanted them to be gay and to come out, just because I knew that if they experienced any hurt or pain that you had, I'm like, oh, it's so worth going there than to stay hidden and stuck and, you know, quieted. Like it just felt like something unlocked in you and things clicked in your life that I was like, I want this for every person who's ever felt the way that you felt, because your story is so, I'm like, the more stories I hear about this or people who are in your same situation, I'm like, there's so much pain there, and I can't imagine someone, I mean, the same question, like, what if we were in your shoes? What if the story was flipped? So that was a big deal for me. Huge.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So there was something there. It's great. Thanks for sharing. It's beautiful. For one, either one of you has something you want to throw in here? Or you do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was living at the time in a house of men with mixed viewpoints on this, and we all had, it was kind of a communal, kind of a discussion at one point, because you'd come out to the team at large, and the guys I was living with were on the team. And I remember those conversations were like a little hard, at least for me, because some of the humanity was stripped. I think everybody keeps bringing that up. There's like this human element, and I couldn't get past that either. I was like, but this is Mike we're talking about, you know. And we'd go to all these different areas of thought and theology and all this stuff, and I just kept coming back to like, well, crap. I keep landing on certain, like, sure, I can maybe justify that this is wrong or something, but I'm like, but we're talking about Mike. And that, I don't know if I ever told you that. That was something I represented pretty consistently, just being like, let me reel it in, guys. Like, I don't know if, like, what are we talking about? This feels really strange. And I think part of that, and I'll try and be brief, is like, I grew up in the church, and as well, small Christian school, right to giant megachurch ministry school. And there's this, you know, giant celebration of like finding your tribe, finding your people, you know, like finding the people that you can run with, or like, you know, just where God leads you. Leaders, having a leader was such a big value. And I just remember always being really detached from that idea, especially going through school. I was just like, I don't know. And I think maybe it was the examples around me. I wasn't very inspired. I was like, And I remember in my second year of school, I did your class, and I didn't like the subject matter. We all know that. Anyways, listen, I flipped over. It was fine. But the thing is, I remember looking at the team and just being like, I feel love here. And that's something that hit me in those weeks after you came out. I was like, man, Mike, like I had no doubt you knew God. I had no doubt you knew love and Jesus and his family. I was like, I feel that. I felt that in your life since day one. And that was just such a big piece of like, well, crap. I've been taught this is where I turn and I leave, because this person doesn't know that they can't be in this game. They can't know this love or God in that way, you know. Like, it gets weird. How can you separate that aspect of a person like that? But then, with the discussions in my house and everything after that, I was just like, well, listen, and this is me talking to myself. I remember just being like, I believe love is on your side. Like, you know God this way. Like, I've never at all had that doubt. And when this came up, I was just like, well, if love's over there and not over here, I suppose I'm going to go over there because I know this person and I trusted you in your process. And the same thing as Zach, I didn't look into this myself. This wasn't something that I took on. And man, in those weeks afterwards, I remember being like, I would think back on my life and there were so many people I know that are gay. And I just kind of cubbied them. I just shoved them in a corner of my brain or in my social circles growing up. I was just always so outgoing and everything. And I know the people, especially in my Christian school, felt very outcasted when this was in their life and they didn't know what to do with it because it's a Christian school, you're not supposed to be gay. But they would come to me and I always would want to include them, but I wouldn't know what to do with this because I was being trained, this is not allowed, this is not allowed, over and over again. And it's just so painful. And I was like, I just took it as a sign. I'm like, out of everybody I could have met at school, out of everywhere I could have gone, I'm like, this matters to me. And there's more to this than just the Bible. That's where I landed in that conversation. I was like, man, there's got to be more. And I would rather be the person that goes down the wrong path because I love somebody and because I actually have a relationship with them than sticks with the crowd or does anything else. And that's in those first weeks where I made my choice. I was like, no, I'm going to stick this through because there's more to this. So, yeah. Wow, I need to get that out, apparently.
This is like therapy for us. What are we doing? Obviously, we all understand we went on our journeys of the theology and reading the books and watching the videos and listening to the speakers and meeting these people in real life and having these conversations. What a privilege. It's awesome that we've gotten to have those connections and all those things. So we've done that. We can touch on that at some point, maybe. But I'm like, Rainbow Road's going to hit that, so I don't know if we need to talk about it here. I've had to represent to each of you individually or to us as a group or whatever, there's a difference between permitting a gay person to be around you and getting in a gay person's boat, right? As in, there's a difference between being, I love you, but I can't agree, versus I'm going to be an ally to this community and stand up for a marginalized people group who are being terribly treated for unjust reasons. This is not sanctioned by God, right? I was like, there's a difference. And then I definitely pursued clarifying that in our relationship, in our felt experiences of me in this context. What was it like for you to recognize the difference between, oh, I'm not going to hate Mike for this, going from that to, oh, crap, I'm going to take some rocks for this, right? Because that was a choice that each of you had to make. And I was aware of, the resistance at times and then watching the changes or whatever. And my goal wasn't to get you to be that, but to address, if you want to be that way, that's okay. It's not okay here. Something needs to change here if that's how you want to do this, right? It was basically the conversations. So I want to hear, what was that process like for you? How did you get past the, okay, fine, I'll just be okay with it, to I'm standing with you here and I'm accepting all of the people like this? I'm not talking about me in particular. I'm talking about recognizing this is more than just Mike. We went past, oh, this is someone I care about, someone personally that I know. There's something else going on in this whole evangelical or religious persecution experience that I didn't know I was part of. And now I'm like, I actually can't just be okay with this anymore.
I think that process started more along the lines of when I allowed myself when I started deconstructing. I think that was probably the bigger thing of challenging, addressing, analyzing why I believe what I believe, and realizing that the beliefs I had about homosexuality, if I was writing a paper, it's D+. It's failing pretty much. I don't have a lot of evidence. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. There's no way I could justify it. There's no way I could justify it if someone, a gay person asked me, hey, what do you think about this? It's I don't know. I literally just was I don't have an answer here, But when I started actually recognizing, okay, what is it actually trying to say, right? And reading the Bible in a way that's what is it trying to tell me about who God is, and not less so about what it's trying to tell me how to live, but trying to tell me who he is, what he represents, who he's fighting for, right? And I think we were reading A New Kind of Christianity, right? And that book changed a lot for me because it.
Can you say the author's name?
Brian McLaren. That book changed a lot for me because it helped me actually see the Bible, or have an appreciation for the Bible in a way that I actually knew it to be. Because I think when I first started coming to the church, I was like high school, right? Like I skipped all the Sunday school stuff, like Ian. But when I came into it, like, and then I started like actually reading the Bible because I wanted to read the Bible, right? Like because I wanted to get to know God. It was a really beautiful book. I was learning about God. It was love. It was hot. I was learning. I was like I was being renewed, and I was like, it's teaching me about God. It's not trying to tell me how to live. It's teaching me about who He is. And I had like encounters with Him because of the Bible, So like after a while, I started reading the book more like I would read an English paper or an essay that I would analyze, and that's the part that was like a red flag for me. I remember leading Bible studies and being like, I just led this Bible study and analyzed this passage in the Bible like I would have an English paper. That was devoid of God, like relationship and teaching, and like a relationship with Him and understanding Him wasn't there. I was like, that was all brain. I was like, I missed something. Something happened. Something changed in me. So I think like deconstructing and actually like finding a place that was like, what is the Bible trying to tell me again, and like renewing that and finding that like hope again and excitement of this is what He's representing, and all the ways that God has showed up for people, and how He's like in the context of the time, how in the incredible ways that He's like pushed against oppression. He's pushed against the poor treatment of disenfranchised peoples, and all the ways, right? Except it's like, and then you like, so it's just opposing so many things of like this like vicious, murderous God, right? Like He's just this, but He's not that, So that was a huge process for me, because it was realizing what the Bible's trying to tell me is more than just trying to tell me that this person is bad because of this one thing they can't change, right? That was probably a really big turning point. And then I think the other turning point that like really like set something like that flipped a switch in me was just realizing how the word homosexuality came into the Bible, when it came into the Bible. That was a huge game changer for me, because I was like, well, what the hell? If it's that recent, if it's within the last 60, 70 years, like, what about the remaining like 2,000 years of like after Jesus, or not even just like after those 2,000 years? Like, what about like the rest of freaking time and all those human beings? Like, what about those people? How do they interpret this? Like, what does that look like for them? And that really just like helped me understand. Again, context was just like super important.
To me, it started when I started to take note of how I like treated you when you first came out. Like, as you confronted me and represented like, hey, this sucks how you're treating me. I think the more I like processed how like what you were representing in our relationship, I was like, I treat all gay people like this. Like, there's never, like, I've never had a relationship with another gay person the way that I do with you, but still in my heart, like, it's the same attitude. It's the same, like, okay, you're like over there now. It's not like an inclusive thing. Where things changed for me was recognizing like, I should not be treating people like this. Like, whether I know them or not, like that should not be in my heart at all. And so I started to process this before I like did the research and started looking at theology and the Bible and stuff like that. It was just more like, okay, my heart towards people should never be dismissive or like distant. Like that should never be the case. And so what started for me in becoming an ally was like, I don't want people to see me as just like a part of the church. People who are like, oh, like I don't belong here. I don't want people to feel that way. And so for me, it was more like, okay, I want to be welcoming. I want to be honoring. I want to be curious. I want to be understanding to whatever point I can be, and just be someone who like is a friend to all people, And so that's what started it for me. And then the theology, the research and the books came. And then that's when it started to like really deconstruct, like, oh, I'm actually not seeing like all the reasons why I thought this wasn't okay. Those reasons are gone. And there's a whole bunch to that. But I think just in general, like the more research I did, the more questions I asked, the more lack of answers I got. It was more like, oh, I actually don't see why this is as condemned as I've always condemned it before.
There was a moment that like a rock didn't get thrown at me, but I saw a rock get thrown at you. And it made me be like, oh, I am watching this happen. Like, and I see the line, and I'm not like over the line yet, but like, I don't think that's great. Like, there's just a situation where someone had found out about you through someone, and they reacted to it so with like such like disgust and such quick to be like they knew all the answers, and I think there was a frustration inside me that was like, you know, I had the honor of like hearing your story, but like this person actually never heard your story. They had heard it from someone else, and I have such a value for like honoring what people want. To see other people violate that, I think something inside me was like, I don't care if this is about him being gay or if this is about like someone else like going through something. It has nothing to do with that. Like something was crossed here. And I think even more because you've always represented like vulnerability and like always came with such honesty. So anyways, I remember having a conversation with this person and there was no door. And that was just the first time where I was like, sure, there's no rock getting thrown at me, but like I'm seeing this rock get thrown at you and like, I'm just like, there's something wrong here. You know, I think that was just the first beginning steps of like, yeah, I want to be an ally here.
So I remember when I was like laying on my couch, staring out the window, just being like, okay, what does this mean for like what I could say yes to here? Like if I go down this route, what does this mean? What does this look like? And I just remember thinking like, yeah, there's gonna be loss here. There's gonna be loss. And I remember having like conversations with people around me. I was so scared to talk to people around me who I knew like weren't gonna agree. Family members, close friends, people from ministry school, you know, pastor, all this stuff. And I just remember like having those conversations and people were saying, I don't know, they just like didn't have definite answers here. Didn't have like a lot to say against this. That I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. And I think a lot of people can relate more to this than not. Like, I think this is absolutely like, there's a political side to this where it's like, man, like everyone needs rights. Like there should absolutely be no discrimination, never. Like the majority of the population I think can agree with that. And then you look at the love side of this. And as Christians, it's like isn't our message love? So like, where's the confusion here? And when you go in with an open heart and like consideration here, and you ask the person across from you, like, okay, so why do you disagree with this? They don't have a lot to give or to say, and there's like compelling stuff on both sides. So I remember thinking that, man, this isn't black and white. Maybe like one side doesn't have it more right than the other. I want to go back to the whole, like, I think more people can relate to this than not. Like more.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, I think people.
Everybody's gay.
I actually, okay, so.
No, don't answer that, Aaron. Just kidding. Say what you need to say.
Okay, so there's this stat I just read that said 5% of the population is gay. And then there's a stat that says Gen Z, so 1997 to 2015, it's a 20%.
21%.
21% population. That's millions of people.
Wow.
Preach it.
21%.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Well, they would identify with, queer,
With
being queer in some
LGBT,
way.
yeah.
Oh my God.
Isn't that crazy?
The world or the United States?
She doesn't remember.
I saw the numbers, I was like, oh my God. California. We need to be allies, because everyone relates to this. No one's completely straight. Oh God, cut this out. Cut this out.
I'm not cutting this out. Oh God, that's hilarious.
The biggest turning point of me being like, I can take some stones for this, would be the fact that I realized it's like an ethical problem in the church. Huge problem. Big gaping hole problem. And I have firsthand experience. And I'm going to tell a story. It's horrible, and I hate it, but I'm going to tell a story. Small Christian school, okay? We know the kind. I was like definitely social butterfly, and I had a lot of like, I think like social clout in my little circle, and I was able to like kind of spin things however I wanted. I'd kind of lead things, and I knew it. I knew what I was doing. There was a guy that joined my junior high class that everyone would call him a fag. They would call him names. They were like horrible to him, and I participated with that hardcore in like a not fun way, and this is another thing I think that came to mind after you came out to me, and I bring this up because like. There was no voice for him in that environment, in that Christian school, right? There was nobody, I don't know in leadership if people knew. I don't even know if people knew. I don't know if people cared. I just remember the way he was treated. It was like a known thing. Like people knew about it, and there was not a big voice coming to defend him. And even just the place he was, like it didn't even have to be about affirming or not. I just remember he just did not have a huge defense happening. And I remember like being a bully to him. It was horrible. Like I participated actively. I was like a gatekeeper for the way he was treated. And I remember a few specific times in locker rooms where he would just like was picked on and messed with and pushed and shoved. And like genuinely, that's like one of my like, I'm most like, I think ashamed of that. If I look back, I'm like, that's something I feel guilty for. And like, I don't want that guilt to go away. That was a horrible thing. I think I should feel that. And I think having someone like, I definitely think for people that don't have anyone in their life that is gay or is like, has come out of the closet or is brave enough to stand on that viewpoint, especially to say God is with them. Like you can't know until you have somebody that you know come out. Like, and I think just somebody that's just always been drilled, like heterosexual, straight, conservative Christians, especially if you don't have somebody that you know that's come out to you, it just changes the game. And it just became this ethical thing. And I remember those stories of that guy that I bullied coming up to my mind and just being like, that's awful. That in and of itself should just speak to, nope, something's wrong. Like, that's bad. And then this happened, and this was live time, so this wasn't in the past. I was at work, and where I worked dealt with a lot of people, and we talked to a lot of people, and this was with the church. And the conversations and the slurring and the disrespect for people that when we would connect with them would like come out to us, like over the phone, vulnerably. The amount of jokes that were thrown around in that office blew my mind. It was like I couldn't stay in there after a certain point. And this was after you came out to me. I was like, how can I stay in this room right now? I realized like, if I stay in here and I don't say something, I'm going to like massively regret it. So I just left the room because I wasn't quite ready yet. I just was red hot. I was like, this is like pissing me off. And I was living with you. And I just was like, it was unbelievable. I remember staying in that room being like, this, where I am, is supposed to be a representation of like love on the planet. And it's what we're doing in this office matters. Like the things that we're saying, they mattered. The way we were treating people when they weren't in the room, it still matters. Why was this a subject that was fine with just being like, throw these things out everywhere? And I was disgusted by it, frankly. And I felt like it was extremely unethical. And I think, I have my opinion, of what I believe about Jesus and who he would be today and who he would affiliate himself with. And I just am like, I don't think I'm the crazy one to be on this side. I don't think I'm the crazy one to be supporting someone that I love and not telling this person like, hey, guess what? You don't know God anymore. Or in this spot, you don't know him. You're deceived. So weird.
Mika is now joining us. Zach and Mika have switched out because they're doing the co-parenting thing.
I think for me, it happened in like a couple of stages. My heart was there like pretty quickly, and then it took a while for my brain to actually catch up. So actually for me, heart-wise, I was affirming, like when Mike told me about his Taylor Swift process. He called me.
We're calling it the Taylor Swift process.
Did you call it that?
No, I didn't call it that.
Whatever, the Taylor Swift moment.
That was important.
That was the marking point. He called me and was like, I need to talk to you. So we were walking around in the woods and he was telling me about this moment and just like some of the research he had done. And I, in the moment, was like, okay, is this sketchy? Is this like the beginning of Mike like losing his mind and like going down a weird road? Like, is it happening? Like, is it time? Kind of a thing.
You like pulled out the emergency kit you had prepared for this day.
But at the same time, I felt this like invitation for hope and for peace and to like not have the answers, but trust like something big is happening here. I don't think he's crazy. I don't think that this is something like here to derail or deceive or something like that. And I was like hit with this like peace where all of my typical like mental bullet points as to why this can't be what God is doing, like Taylor Swift's wrong, like whatever, like all the things that my brain would typically bring up like stopped mattering. And I was like, interesting. I think I even in the moment brought up like I generally would think like because gay couples can't like have babies, that's probably like a sign, right? Like nature's probably saying like that's not like a thing that the Lord's affirming or something like that. But even as I was saying it, I was like, but also like not everybody has babies, and like kind of recognizing like I don't know why this is such a big deal or how this has been like the thing that like unravels this whole people group from like being valid. And so I think it was actually like that moment of him bringing it up and the Lord like reopening, like this isn't a done deal, this isn't settled. The things that like I've thought are settled are actually not like as valid or as like important as I'd thought that they were. And then from there, it was my brain catching up for like another year and a half.
The company that I worked for at the time was very Christian. So there's a lot of Christians around me. So I was like kind of broaching the question here and there. Like, so what do you think about like, you know, homosexuality? You know, like what would you do with that? You know, and I started talking about like some of my thought process here a little bit, and not without going into like making a statement that I'm affirming, but like kind of saying that, like I think I'm finding evidence like that I'm more affirming than not, you know? And that was really interesting because people didn't know what to do with that. You know, they kind of avoided the conversation. That was generally the response. They just avoided it. And I was like, okay, I guess. And so I think I just started getting this like, this thought that like, they're kind of like weak-willed around here, you know, like they don't have a lot of backbone, you know, they can't at least like back up what you have to think about it, you know, and they're all just like, it's like a gray area, you know, and they just kind of back out of the conversation by kind of going that route, you know. I was like, oh, that's there's nothing there. That's nothing, you know. And so I think that like helped, I think like give me more of a backbone of actually like, I think I need to like press this more. I need to know if anything, like just find out where people stand and get them to commit to something. That was like kind of like my goal after a while. But like fast forward until like after you came out, right? My response there was a lot more publicly. Yeah, sorry. When you came out publicly, that was I mean, it was really cool to see a lot of people celebrating, you know. But man, I was like, I haven't felt that angry in a long time for these random people on the internet that I don't even know who they are, you know. Freaking, you know, I don't know these people, you know, but I just was like, I just was cursing at these people. I was unbelievably angry at how rude and mean and inconsiderate and unkind people were to you, to a person, you know, like to another human being, just like social. I was like, just socially, this is so wrong. Like who you don't say this just as a person, you don't say this. It's like you don't say it like that, you know? So I think I was just like, man, outside of the Christian conversation of like what God thinks about this or what you think God thinks about this, like how you're approaching this to another person already is like freaking jacked up. You know, like this is so wrong. I was just angry. I was like calling people names all the time, you know. Part of my process here was also just recognizing like, what does my response actually look like here? You know, because I think I like held back. I don't know what your guys' response was, but like I definitely held back on on responding to some of those things, especially on like your public pages and stuff like that. Because I was like, am I inciting something? You know, am I like making this worse? You know, or is this like not helpful? And then a conversation also comes up about like what being an ally actually looks like, what it looks like to support a person, what actual support looks like, you know. And that like started to challenge me too, you know, because you know I'm like already like, yeah, I love you, I support you, but like, you know, I don't agree with you, you know, like I was like, oh, what does support actually look like here? And it's like, oh, it's time. I think I need to say something, you know. I need to be a person who actually represents this, because again, this is also just not for me, but understanding that like letting someone just say something and then not responding to it means that there's another person on the other side. There's another gay person that looks at that and says, oh, no one responded to this, I guess that must be true. Mm-hmm. You know, that was my thought. I was like, I would hate for that to happen, because that's not true. And people need to know that, you know. That gay kid who's in the closet, who's scared but loves God and doesn't know what to do with it, needs to know that that's not true, you know. And so just to oppose it, to give them an opportunity to like recognize that there's possibility there. I think that was a big turning point for me, and wanted to be like, you know what, if you're gonna throw punches, I'm gonna throw punches too, and I can throw some punches, you know. I don't know, there's like a red hot thing in here, you know, because this isn't about, like, I don't think this is about Christianity, you know, because we're talking about how you treat people here, you know, because I think if people, like, if this was a conversation, it'd be way better. I feel confident in, like, being able to have a conversation, but, like, this isn't a conversation. They're just throwing knives at you, at a person, you know. I'm like, this is not God.
Theologically, so on the Bible side of this, talking about scriptural basis for changing your mind about this. Love the heart stuff, love the humanizing part of it. So necessary, so important, so relevant, for sure. Now, explicitly in the theology camp, what was a significant, or the moment, or whatever, piece of information, argument, evidence, scriptural basis, whatever. What book, what talking point, what speaker, what person that we've brought around us. What in the theology space was a game changer for you in terms of theologizing your way to becoming affirming with scripture?
For me, it was Clobber, Colby Martin. I hadn't really read much of anything about the clobber passages. I knew that they existed. I'd definitely been fed them my whole life, but I hadn't really read through them very much. So him going through the context and the kind of debunking the face value of what I'd been taught they meant, I was really expecting to have a harder time letting go of what I'd been taught. And I think we got to Romans and I was like, okay, Romans, this is New Testament, this is a big deal. And that whole chapter, I was reading the whole chapter and I was like, this is a no-brainer. This is obviously not talking about actual gay people that we have in our context now. This is not talking about actual relationship. This isn't anything like what this conversation is about. How do we pull this verse out and throw it at people? That's so weird. And so I remember getting to Romans and being like, okay, that's the last one, and every single one of these is so absurd. To take this verse and try to shove it into this context and call it good is yeah, this is all of these just fell so flat. I was expecting it to be more robust or having to wrestle through it more, and it was really just oh yeah, this is fake. It just felt that's not what we're talking. This is so silly. And so it was I hit Romans and unclobber and was okay. It was a non-issue. It was I don't have any trouble letting go of this because it was misplaced in the first place. So
Unclobber by Colby Martin was a big one for me. That was the first book that I've read specifically about homosexuality that kind of just opened up the conversation for me about specific Bible verses that I've just been reading my entire life. But on top of that, it was also God and the Gay Christian by Matthew Vines. I think after reading that book, I was the Bible doesn't address sexual orientation. We've been using it as if it does, but it's not addressing. It doesn't actually address it. And so I think my answer is pretty simple. It's just I think those books just stripped away all the reasoning behind those verses that I had and that I've learned in church. But I'm that's a different conversation entirely from what we've been putting it into. So
God and the Gay Christian, Matthew Vine starts talking about the word abomination. If you can look into that, because the New Testament, right? Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was oh yeah, Romans. Let's get to it. What does God think about this? That's what does God? What does God think? Paul. What does our brother Paul God think about this? And the thing is, the word abomination is if you go into the cultural context, because the thing is that matters. Cultural context has mattered every single day of the week. Okay? There's not been a day of the week where it hasn't mattered. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. All right? So here's the thing though. I think I'm saying that or laughing at it because I'm church culture, it's everything's about context now. I think there was just a period of time where I realized I think maybe a reformation going on, maybe even a little bit in the church, throughout the 2000s where people started caring a lot more about context and stuff. And that was it almost felt like a buzz in a certain way. And it still matters here, and that's why I made such a big joke about that. But the word abomination refers to a ton of things in the ancient culture. There's a whole list of them. I'm not going to go into them now. But the thing is, all of us are abominations. And I'm being honest, no, I'm serious. Here's the thing. Have you ever ate a clam? You're an abomination. Have you ever worn mixed linen? You are now an abomination, which guess what? Gay people are that too. So you're on that same level now. That's how that works. That's the way that word in that context is appropriated to smear monogamous, loving gay relationships. And after I learned that, I was oops. Can't do that anymore. I don't know what to do with that.
It was Unclobber by Colby Martin. Just feel like I'm doing a plug, I had to get that out. But get that book. I think it was when I read about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and it was I think growing up in my church, that's the story they would always reference when it came to homosexuality. And I just remember I also went to a church that was that's why this storm went to this place, that's why a tornado blew through this cities, because there's a bunch of gay people there, and just you wait, Vegas is gonna get hit, so gnarly.
Oh my God, me too.
You're right. Yeah. Literally.
San Francisco.
Oh.
The fault line.
Yeah. And so they would always just relate all these cities to Sodom and Gomorrah. And so I think I always related it to that. When Colby just kind of told us the context. I mean, I learned a lot of stuff, you know, especially the daughter part. Like that was, I think that's something I wanted to even, I was just like, what? But that was just like a moment where I realized like, oh, this gets to be a player on the field. Like this like conversation, this argument, like the affirming side, like actually gets to be a player, and it just never like got to be. And so it's just like this moment where it's like, okay, maybe it's not like this crazy black and white evidence. It's just like uprooted all the other beliefs I had, like the non-affirming side, like it just uprooted that. I was just like, oh, it actually gets to be a player here. Whereas before, like I was always told like there was an attitude that it could never be an option. So that was just super helpful for me.
I think for me, it was a story of Lot, and talking about that being a passage that, you know, homosexuality is like, no, get that out of here, because that happened, and God clearly said, do not do that. And then like zooming in on it and being like, man, that was not a homosexual act at all. Like that was not like love or attraction. Like that was gang rape. Like even going back to like the entire passage is about hospitality or tradition. I'm like, oh my God, why are we like focusing on this so much? That to me was absolutely shocking. I think that was probably like a pivotal moment for me. I was like, yeah, and it continues to stick with me. I'm like, I think about that all the time.
I would say I think the most influential book in this process or resource was on Clobber, in terms of like, oh, well, that's like a lot of us, right? I think that was a really helpful transformational book because he puts it in a really digestible way that helps you consider the Bible, but also what God's trying to represent for people. The way, the time, the year that homosexuality got entered into the Bible, I didn't learn that until we had a conversation with Kathy Baldock. And she and Ed were like just talking about their freaking Scooby-Doo Avengers, you know? Of like finding out where this came from, you know? And that was such a wild ride because of their, like, all the work they put into like finding that. And I was like, man, I think I love vocabulary. I love words, right? And so I think the idea that this one word came into the Bible at a specific time, like within the last like less than 100 years, is like so shocking to me. You know, that already raises so many flags of like, well, it can't apply to so many other things if it's so recent. So that was a big thing for me.
My last question is, you've been a human being who went on a journey for the last year and a half or however long it's been. You've invested time and energy and heart and academics and research and thought process and your relationships and your reputation into this. So your opinion matters here. You paid a price. You know some things now you didn't know a little bit ago. You know things that most Christians don't know, specifically regarding this issue. I want to know from you, what is a piece of advice you would give to people who are at the beginning of this journey or considering going on the process of becoming affirming? Or what was something you wish you had known from the get-go that you didn't know and you learned along the way?
If I had to give advice to anyone, I would probably just say, don't be afraid to look at this. I think like that's probably the scariest thing, where it's like it's okay to be on a journey here. Like it took us a year and a half. Like it's been maybe a 2-year journey. What I didn't know I would feel and was really surprised by is I started a new job when I came to Nashville, and there are employees who are LGBTQ, and I have felt so connected to them. I think before, like when I was a Christian,
What just
That was a confession. Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. That was crazy.
I realized it before everyone else, and then y'all all heard it.
I was like, what? I got that on.
No.
Crazy.
Oh my God.
I'm not cutting that out either.
Wait a second.
She's always like, cut that out.
I didn't mean to say that, actually.
Don't be afraid, but you won't be a Christian at the end.
Okay, are we over that?
I will never be over that.
What I meant to say was growing up in the church, and when I was not affirming, if you knew someone was gay or if you were around people, like you just had this wall up and it was just there, and it was just this immediate like, I have to disconnect with you, or I don't know how to connect with you, or there's, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Uncommonality?
Uncommonality?
Differences.
Oh,
Right,
God.
just use it. Just You're not a Christian anymore. It doesn't matter what you say at this point.
God, that's true. I just remember being non-affirming and just feeling this wall between me and any queer person I came into contact with. There's this disconnection. I couldn't relate to them. And now being on the other side, I had no idea I would feel this way, but there's this celebration in me. There's this excitement to get to know this person and know their story. And probably like at the beginning in a weird way that I was like, I'm so curious about you. Tell me, are you gay? Like, tell me when you knew that. I did that a lot. Not a lot.
I did that a lot.
I love the excitement I feel when I meet people like that. And I get to work side by side with people. And to be the first one maybe to have ever celebrated them here, especially like being in the South, like that's so uncommon. And a lot of people aren't like forthcoming with that because of where we live. Like that is so cool. I've like been so surprised by the connection I feel just to humanity and just like love. Like that was really surprising. So that's a huge piece of advice, or just like a win that you'll probably experience.
I would maybe give 2 pieces of advice. First is to allow yourself to consider something different. If you go into this conversation looking to defend a position or to prove someone wrong or right, it's not going to go well. You're gonna find evidence to prove what you want. Go into this with the open heart and be considerate for a human being. Like imagine if there's like a human being in front of you, what would you say to them? You know, and what is God saying about a person? The second thing is to allow yourself to be honest with what you're feeling. I'm not proud of the fact that I had to work through a lot of homophobia. But it's true. I really had to work through that, and it was really uncomfortable because I had to confront so many things in myself that I didn't like, but I had to do it. I needed to do it. So it was really uncomfortable, but you know, whatever comes up for you, like even if it's uncomfortable, I encourage you to continue to push through that, to work through that, and be honest with what you're actually feeling, and then find out where it comes from. You know, is it something that's rooted in something good and like necessary or whatever, or is it something that's like, you know, trained you to feel something, to believe something that's not actually good for you?
All right, my piece of advice for someone starting this process from somebody who's a bully to someone that was called a fag and was taken advantage of in just horrible ways socially growing up in a Christian school. The suicide rate is like super high amongst gay people. It's twice as high amongst gay Christians. I think we should ask the question why. And not just settle for tropes like they were abused, or why would that give us more reason to like shun them? That's a funny thing to look at. It's like, oh, they were abused as a kid. That means we should exclude them more. I don't know. I think you should ask the question, why is it twice as likely that someone that you know who's a believer that's gay would kill themselves just because they're in church? It doubles the standard. That's awful. We have to ask those like big questions. I genuinely had thoughts of like, what if my child is gay? What if I have a child that I love with all my heart and they're like, I'm gay. And then they're in church and they're a part of that twice as likely, right? That's a horrible thing to think about. But I think we should ask the question. I think it's an ethical issue. I think we should open our hearts to the fact that Jesus would be protecting these people.
Okay, first piece of advice I would give would be, I think just saying like, no question is a dumb question. Like, I think it's really important to be really honest with this, just with your process and the questions that you have. Like, I think it's like you're not going to get anywhere if you're like keeping your process hidden or just away from other people. Like, it's really important to actually like dialogue and be really open about where you're at. What I wish I knew, whether I say something or not about this, like it affects somebody. I wish I was aware of that and more sensitive. And so I guess with that, I would just say like, whether you say something or not, it says something.
In this process, like, be prepared to find darkness in you. I know that sounds super bleak, but like nobody wants to like go on a journey and discover like I have hatred in my heart. Like you don't want that. But I think we need to be prepared that like you probably will. Like I don't think that we would have to have this conversation if that wasn't there. But also like in the same breath, like that darkness doesn't belong to you. Like that's not inherent to people. We're not designed to hate each other or to like disqualify a human from getting to be a human. So I think for me, like discovering like there's some stuff here that's not from the Lord. I learned it in church, but that doesn't mean that the Holy Spirit's on it. And so having to actually like confront that and be honest that like I feel this way, I've treated people this way, whether or not I said it out loud, it happened in my heart, and I marginalized people or I like harmed people, whether or not I meant to. And for me, it was actually that recognition that like there's something icky in here that's not aligned with who Jesus is, that actually motivated me to keep looking and keep digging, because I was like, if I'm recognizing this as evil, it can't be from the Lord. And there's no way that I'm more sympathetic to humans than God is. And so like, if this bothers me, like it's gotta bother him. We have to be wrong on this, because I can't be more compassionate to another person than their dad could be. So I'm like, I had to find the darkness and like pull it out and be like, oh God, this is here. But also the fact that it's there is evidence to me that like, that doesn't belong to the Lord. That like, we got this wrong somewhere and we can like do better. And I think also, on that journey, like repentance happens at some point. It's got to happen, but it gets to happen. Like that darkness gets to go away. Like you don't have to hold on to the hatred or the resistance, the walls, the diminishing, that kind of stuff. Like you don't have to hold on to that. And I've actually like, I wish that I'd known at the beginning of this how much freedom and redemption there is on the other side. Even I'm not gay. Like this isn't personally like affecting my specific identity, but the ability to like let other people be free and to actually be free to love them as much as I want to, like that is in line with the heart of God. And if I'd known that from the get-go, this process would have gone a lot faster. Wow. So I would just say that.
If there's anything I would have known beforehand, it's like, it's the shock of knowing that like God's actually like in this. Anything and everything I've ever been told is, don't watch that. Don't watch Love, Simon. Don't open the door. Don't listen to that artist that, you know, is gay. Don't do those things. Like, it's going to open a door to something. And what I've been shocked by is that, like, God's in this. So if you're, like, hungry to actually touch a facet of his nature, like, you're going to find it here. Wherever you end up, actually opening yourself up here, like, he's going to be in it. So I think that was a shock factor. It was the reason why I didn't want to look at it. And then I was shocked that he was there. And I, like, was sad that I missed out on him. And so I'm so glad that I'm not.
So I just want to take a moment to respond. Firstly, I want to say, wow. I mean, that last bit of advice, I'm like, whoa, who are you people? This is amazing. I think I was feeling this the night of the coming out party when you all got to chime in with your own thoughts and feelings. I feel similarly now, the uniqueness and the ownership that each of you have taken in your own process and journey, and what you see and what you experience, what you're compelled by. Like, there's such a diversity here, and I love it. I just feel very proud. I'm so proud of you guys. This is amazing. And this is not easy. Like, as we've witnessed, this is not something most people know how to do well, don't know how to, like, you know, overcome or even get past. So many people like see this or confronted by something and they just shove it away. So I am so proud of you guys for being willing to push past the comfortable, the safe, the clean, the upright, the upstanding, the respectable space, and choose the side of the marginalized, and choose to get hit with those rocks too, because you discovered something real. Amazing. So thank you for sharing all that. Thank you for sharing your process. I know you guys don't have to do this, so thank you for being generous at being vulnerable and willing to like admit the things and share the things and just share it with these guys. To you guys, I want to say, this is not manufactured. I didn't have questions in advance that we were going to talk about. I was like, let's get a roundtable going. Let's just sit down and talk. Let's, you know, just process and share what this journey was like. And not because we're the standard, not because we're the shining example, but because we did this and we are moving forward and we are seeing incredible results in our own personal lives. Like, forget anybody else outside of this. The amount of fruit that's come out of this process for each of us individually, the freedom, the love, the compassion, the ability to actually like empathize with another human being, to be conscious of someone more than us outside of our own experience. My ability to relate to other people's pain that I've not experienced before has gone through the roof. And I thought I was a pretty empathetic person before all of this. I'm shocked at how selfish and narrow-minded I was before I went on this process. Like, I've become so much more. I'm just saying, there's a ton of really good fruit that's come out of our process, not just regarding homosexuality or the LGBTQ plus community as a subject, but as being people of love and relationship and care. We have all become better people because of this. So I would like to encourage you guys, whatever the costs, whatever challenges or obstacles you face in doing your due diligence of actually looking into this and working through this and getting rid of the hatred and the bigotry and the hypocrisy and the indoctrination and the condemnation of other people, and getting to touch freedom and life and the liberty for captives, like, going there, that is the work of the gospel. I don't know what else in your Christianity is going to matter more than your ability to love your neighbor. Like, that's what this work is about. This is not all that entails, but this is absolutely part of it. So I want to implore you guys, as you are considering this or working through it yourself, we want to just take a moment to say, this matters. This is important. Haley, I love what you said. That's so true. You not responding is a response, and it does have consequences whether you're aware of it or not. So we want to just take a moment to say, please join us on this journey. If you guys have any questions or need help or resources, please reach out. I think we've done the best we can to be as overt and like forthcoming with that already. But if you still don't know, like, please reach out to us. We were happy to give you resources and links and other books and speakers. And I'm going to continue to crank out content to just help supply you with things to work through in this conversation. We have people to care for. We have lives to save. Like Ian's dark response of like the suicide rate is a real thing. There are actual people in the world right now actually killing themselves because of how they're treated and the way that they've just been so suppressed from their own humanity, which is so wrong. It's vile that that's going on, and it's still happening. So this is not just like, oh, this feels like a fun thing we should do, or like, I just want to like be more myself, like, and that's worth it. But there are also people's lives that are diminishing and being snuffed out because of how we as a majority have treated them and handled this. We have to, like Mika said, do better. We've got to do better here. So no condemnation, no judgment, but absolute invitation and an imploring. Please take this seriously and engage. In whatever ways that we can contribute to that and help, we want to help. So please reach out to us. There'll be links below for other resources and ways to connect. Thank you guys for joining us on this journey. Hey. If you're an LGBTQ plus person, I want to let you know about some opportunities and resources available to make sure you can take advantage of them over here at Pneuma. Firstly, if you need help processing through your journey of being a queer person, of coming out, of being in the closet, of working through being queer, my team of coaches are here and they're available to help you work through that process. If you want that one-on-one attention, I would recommend working with one of our coaches. If you're working out the theology of what does the Bible say about you as a queer person? How does God feel about you? What does it look like in the theology space for you to stand up and look people in the eyes and know who you are? My Rainbow Road series is available to help you work through those questions and details. If you want to be part of a community of other queer folk who are working through this process, going on their journey of what it means to be a spirit-led believer, a follower of Jesus, a queer person, relating to the church, out of Christianity, whatever that looks like for you, I am personally going to be leading a mentorship group called the Rainbow Room. I would love to invite you to be part of that, where I'll provide mentorship and guidance. There's going to be community support. We're going to have very real life conversations about what it means to be queer. How do we navigate our faith, our walk with the Holy Spirit, continuing to participate in a triumphant, abundant life in light of all the other challenges and obstacles we have to face as queer people. And lastly, if you are still closeted and you want to come out, or if you were outed, or if your coming out experience wasn't as enjoyable as you wanted it to be, I want to let you know that we here at Pneuma want to celebrate you. So we are hosting a big coming out party on June 1st. And I want to invite you, if you're someone in one of those categories who wants to be part of this, who wants to be celebrated, wants to capitalize on that group momentum, we want to celebrate you. We want to come around you and embrace you and accept you and scream your name from the rooftops and celebrate the beauty and the goodness about who you are exactly the way you are. If you're interested in anything I've just mentioned, please email us at contact@mikemaestro.com. I'll provide the email address in the description of this episode. My team will direct you to all the information you need for any of the things I just mentioned.
I have to leave early. I'm going to work.
You want to plug your Instagram and TikTok?
Oh my God.
That's why.